We have to deal with each other. Sometimes a person might rub you the wrong way a little bit, stuff like that. You have to deal with them. It's also really important. So these things are really essential. We have to deal with each other. Like a person might rub you the wrong way. All right, good. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير النفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة حتى التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله وجهه وقربه وثوابه. Bismillah. Okay, so we're on this section on the rights of brotherhood and sisterhood and companionship, if you recall. And we had covered the first duty. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفع الله بها في علومه آمين. That means the author says the following: and may God bring us and him benefit from his knowledge in this life and the next. Ameen. So the first duty is to fulfill the needs of one's brothers or sisters. Okay. And I felt like we had, because of the questions that were asked, a very nice conversation on that, actually. And we saw the wisdom in the way that the author made the points that he made. For example, he said the first duty is to fulfill the needs of his brothers. This has different levels. The lowest of which is to help them when they ask for help and when one is able to help, if you remember that. So then we talked about this idea that if you're gonna, and then it talks about the higher levels of being able to help someone. And we talked about how if you're going to help someone at a level that's higher, in the sense that you're able to fulfill their need before they even ask, then the way that you would get to a point where you're able to do that is to start by fulfilling the needs of people when they ask and when you're able to do so, right? This was the first group, is when first level was they ask for help and you're able to help them. So for most of us, this is where we spend our time, right? Someone comes, we know them, they need some help, we're able to help them, we help them. We do that for some time, then usually you become like anything in life. The first stage is kind of a little bit extra intentional. And then as you develop some level of mastery, you gain some dhawq for it. You gain some taste for it, right? You don't have to be told anymore. So the first level, someone has to come to you, ask for your help. If you're someone who's helping people all the time, and you're around people all the time, and you're helping people all the time, you're going to start to recognize when people need help before they even ask help. It's the way things will happen naturally. So we spent some time talking about that. And then there was the second duty, which was supporting them with the tongue. And sometimes that happens through silence, and sometimes that happens through speaking. And we had different things to say about that. Okay. I think we're on the third duty, which is on the bottom of page 68. We already covered it, then inshallah in repetition there's benefit. The third duty is one should stay silent about anything they dislike, unless talking is obligatory in order to command what is right and rebuke what is wrong, and there is no excuse to stay silent. SubhanAllah. These things are much more difficult than they sound. You know? It sounds really simple. It's actually very difficult. So what is it saying? Saying you have a brother, you have a sister, someone you're close with, someone you keep company with. And the duty is to stay silent about anything that this person would dislike, unless it's something that you have to say something about. Okay? And that was the previous chapter. Right? When do you have to say something? When do you not have to say something? The biggest issue would be, it would be something that, you know, there are different levels of things that have to be commented on versus not have to be commented on. Alhamdulillah. So the point is, stay silent about anything that is like. Okay, interesting. Confronting one's friend in a case like this, something you have to say, is actually kindness towards him. So if you have to tell them, You know, they need to be reminded about something. They need to be told about something. Maybe they don't know that something's wrong. You have to tell them. Fine, you have to tell them. That's kindness towards them. But otherwise, if they don't want, if it's going to upset them, you don't bring it up. This is the general default. Now, a lot of people, when they hear this, they're like, but how do you change things? How do you do this? How do you do that? We have sometimes like an overemphasis on our own control over situations. Like we think we have more control than we actually have. So we see it like I have to control it, I have to change it, I have to say something, I have to, how am I going to guide them if I don't say it, even if they dislike it? You know, maybe it's not something that has to be said, but it's something that they would benefit from. And they shouldn't be so sensitive. Why would they dislike it? Well, maybe they're just going to dislike it. You know? So what's your job then? You don't say anything. And believe it or not, people do change when you are a good example around them without you telling them. They do actually change. So, and again, you know, I've mentioned that like one of our teachers in particular doesn't really usually say very much to people. He'll go a place, travel, spend time there. Everyone will come to see him. He doesn't really say much, and they'll leave, and then he'll go to another place. Same thing will happen, and people's lives will change just from that. He didn't have to actually comment on it. And usually, and again, you know, one of the things to understand with this is that there's two things to understand. One of them is, okay, this is the way that I should act. Another one is to understand sometimes the way that people who are trying to do these things, also the way that they function, because you might misunderstand them. You know, like I've seen certain sheikhs, if someone comes to them and they say, Sheikh, we're going to do X and Y. Can you make dua for us? What do you think the sheikh is going to do? Hmm? It's not a trick question. What do you think the sheikh is going to do? Sheikh, we're going to do X and Y. Can you make dua for us? What is the sheikh going to do? Make dua for them. What does the person go and do? They say, we went and talked to the sheikh. We told him we wanted to do this and this and this, and he made dua for us. Yeah. And for them, they're saying like, he's approving this. No, he's not. Not necessarily. You asked him to make dua. He made dua. You didn't ask him, should I do this? Should I not do this? So you didn't ask him, so he's not going to put himself out there in the conversation. You didn't ask, right? You asked for dua. He made dua. Oh, Bismillah. Inshallah, tawfiq, taysir. May Allah bless your efforts. May Allah put barakah, you know. That's what you asked them. Because if you already came, you already made the decision. What's going to happen if they tell you something else? You're going to dislike it. Right? So there's sometimes subtleties in interactions that are important, you know. But anyways, the job is, on a more practical level for us in our regular relationships, it's really hard to do. I mean, just imagine trying to do this on a daily basis. I'm not going to say anything. By the way, if you want to see the most applicable place to all of these conversations is in your family, right? So like take a family member, spouse, especially older children, you know, parents. So I'm not going to say anything to them that they would dislike. Okay, it takes a lot of control, takes a lot of consciousness. Right? Know that should you seek a companion, then he continues. Know that should you seek a companion who is free of faults, you will never find one. The goal is to find someone whose good qualities are more than his bad ones. Okay. So this again is a really powerful principle, actually. I feel like we're moving in the direction of, and this is also something that's only possible in big societies, you know, big places, where you move in a direction where even our relationships are hyper curated. You know, it's like I only choose to spend time with these particular people because they're the only ones that I can get along with, and they're the only ones who I'm okay with, and they checked all my boxes. I'm only going to spend time with these people. Okay, maybe if there's like 500,000 people to choose from, you can find a few, you know, that fit. But is that the way that human existence is supposed to work? I don't think so. You know, I'm not saying that we should accept like I'm not saying that we should necessarily accept bad behavior. Sometimes we do, just to be also like to put it out there, like, sometimes people are like, well, I'm not going to accept this. Well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted a lot of things. He accepted a lot of abuse, accepted a lot of bad treatment. Wasn't necessarily, and I wouldn't probably call him abused in a sense, but he accepted bad behavior from people. People came, grabbed him by his shirt and pulled him. People told him he's not being fair. People told him he's not being just. People told him this. People told him that. People rejected him. People believed in him afterwards and then acted like they did him a favor. I mean, people did a lot of things to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he was had something in himself where it's like, okay, I can tolerate some of that. I'm gonna be okay. Question is, can I tolerate some of that and be okay? Not everyone is in that position, right? So this is where we want to develop ourselves too. But anyways, saying that if you're seeking someone who's free of faults, you won't find them. If you look for someone whose good outweighs their bad. Their good is more than their bad, outweighs it, and you can get along with them. Ibn Mubarak says, radiallahu anh, a believer looks for excuses while a hypocrite looks for mistakes. A believer looks for excuses while a hypocrite looks for mistakes. SubhanAllah. Whenever we bring up these things, then everyone's mind always goes to extreme cases. What's the rule? Do you remember the rule? What's the rule about extreme cases? You can memorize this statement, okay? Hard cases make bad law. Hard cases make bad law. Hard cases make bad law. Okay, so don't immediately go to extreme cases. Go to regular, everyday cases. Believer looks for excuses while a hypocrite looks for mistakes. What happens when you have a society where everyone's looking for everyone's mistakes all the time? Completely crumbles, falls apart. You're not going to have any relationships. Nobody will be able to stay together. No community will be able to stay together. People will be fractured. People will be angry with each other all the time, agitated with each other all the time, threatened with each other all the time. All of these kind of things. Yeah. And again, like we get so like threatened that as soon as we hear this, sometimes we think, well, like, it is actually possible to see the good and focus on the good and not make yourself vulnerable to the bad. It is actually possible. You just have to have like some stability and strength in ourselves. Al-Fudayl said, radiallahu anh, generosity means overlooking the slips of one's brothers. Generosity means overlooking the slips of one's brothers. So here you have so maybe like an extension of what the idea of generosity means, right? Many people, when they think of generosity, immediately the mind goes to giving money. The Prophet ﷺ is always extending this sense. No, it's also sadaqah, it's also charity to have a smile. It's also charity to pick up trash. It's also charity to remove something from the road. It's charity to open someone's door for them. All of these are acts of charity, actually. So what is it? An act of charity is basically, I have something, I'm giving it to someone else. That's charity. So if someone makes a mistake and you overlook the mistake, it's charity. You gave them a gift, basically, right? And at the same time, we give ourselves a gift because it's really like frustrating and debilitating to live your life like that. You notice everyone's mistakes and then you see them and you see them and you see them and you're always holding them accountable for it. It's really tiresome, you know. You just want to live a little bit. At some point, yeah, we have to. It's a lot of good ways that Egyptians would say these kind of things, you know. I just say, "Aish hayatik shway." You just want to live life a little bit. Like it's not. You have to like nitpick on everything. You know, that's a good concept they have. So then he said, you should not think bad about your friend, but should always make good excuses for his actions as much as possible. Indeed, the Prophet ﷺ said, beware of assumptions, for out of all speech, assumptions are the falsest. إياك والظن إن أكذب الحديث فإنه أكذب الحديث or أكذب الحديث الظن, something along these lines. Beware of dhann. Dhann is when you have bad suspicion of someone. Okay, so you see something going on with them, you interpret it in a bad way. There's a famous story that what's his name uses in his book, Stephen Covey. A book on seven habits for highly successful people. It's a very good book, by the way. Just because you read something and you say, "Oh, we totally have all of those ideas in Islam," doesn't take away from the benefit of the way that the idea has been presented. It's okay. We might have all those ideas in Islam. Still, mashallah, you put it in a book in a certain way, it was very beneficial, made sense. So his first thing he talks about is the idea of like shifting your paradigm, the glasses through which you see the world, you know? And he tells this story about being on the subway, and this guy comes on the subway, and the guy's kids are just going crazy, running around here, yelling here, doing this, pulling the newspaper from people, all of these kind of things. And then he said he was looking at it and he started to think like, what's wrong with this guy? Why doesn't he take care of his kids? And he should do this and that. And then and then eventually the guy kind of like noticed what was happening and he apologized to everyone. He said, I'm really sorry. We just came back from the hospital and their mother passed away. And like I'm just not really, you know. So then the author was saying how your perspective changes in a second, right? Like you're looking at the situation in one way, and then your perspective completely changes. This is basically, dhann, is you can look at it and assume the worst, or you can look at it and assume any number of other things. And by the way, you can assume any number of other things and still think that something's wrong. Do you understand? So like someone could say they break into someone's house and they steal their jewelry, right? You could be like, man, this person's a horrible person. Or you could say, you know what, that's wrong and it has consequences. And I don't know why this person did this. I wonder what they've been through in their life. I wonder what their situation is. I wonder, so there's all kinds of other questions that could be asked. One could seek them, right? While at the same time saying that this is unacceptable, actually. So that's one of the difficult things to do. But there's that quote of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani that I always mention, radiallahu anhu, that he said along the lines of أيدينا تقيم الحد وقلوبنا تراعي الود. أيدينا تقيم الحد وقلوبنا تراعي الود. Means our hands, they carry out the prescribed punishment. Certain things in Islamic law, there's a prescribed punishment. You don't really have a choice. They're saying our hands, they carry out the punishment. But our hearts, they maintain love. This is like, how do you do both of these things, right? Assuming that you had to punish in the first place. Sometimes you don't have to punish, right? But anyways, I don't want to get off on that tangent. Beware of assumptions, for out of all speech, assumptions are the falsest. And once we become aware of this in ourselves, we set ourselves up for the necessary experience of kicking ourselves over and over and over again. When you're not even thinking about it, life is whatever. You just make the mistake, you don't realize it, you oppress other people, you move on, day of judgment, you find out. It's actually the worst case scenario. Well, the better case scenario is we start to think about it, and then what happens is the nafs al-lawama kicks in, right? The nafs al-lawama is the nafs base self that goes back and forth. Sometimes it does what's right, sometimes it makes a mistake, and then there's like an internal back and forth. So if I'm recognizing, okay, I shouldn't do this, then what happens is I might get it right a couple of times, and then I'll get it wrong. And I feel like an idiot afterwards. Because after you realize what the situation was, you're like, wait, no, subhanAllah, I really did this person wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have thought about this. But that's necessary. That experience is necessary. Pushes us to get better with it and better with it. And we keep growing, alhamdulillah. The important thing is to keep going. It's not to arrive. Know that evil assumptions lead to unlawful spying, and concealing the faults of other people and overlooking them is the natural quality of the religious. MashaAllah. It's a beautiful expression also. Know that evil assumptions lead to unlawful spying. So now what happens is you make one mistake, it leads to another mistake. Right? So one mistake is I'm assuming bad about other people. Second mistake is even bigger, is basically spying on other people and prying into their affairs and digging deeper into things in their personal life and stuff like that we don't really need to get into, assuming that we don't, and that's the second. Now one thing led to the next. Al-khair yajlib al-khair, وَالشَّرْ يَجْلِبُ الشَّرْ. Good pulls towards more good, and bad pulls towards more bad. So if we don't cut it off, then it leads to another thing. And he says, then concealing the faults of others and overlooking them is the natural quality of the religious. Why? Because someone who has some sort of actual relationship with God, their heart is going to be alive enough that they have some concern about this. Okay, this is, I shouldn't, they have some, like, I need to stop here. This is not my business, actually, and I'm going to stop, you know. And he said, know that one's faith is not complete till he loves for his brother what he loves for himself or sister. The lowest level of ukhuwa entails treating your brother the way you would like others to treat you. So the lowest level of brotherhood is to treat others the way you would like them to treat you. They say isn't that the golden rule? Treat others as you would like to be treated, right? So that's the lowest level. Right? So that's the lowest level. Treat others as you would like to be treated is the lowest level. This said, there is no doubt that you expect your brother to conceal your faults and remain silent about your bad sides. And should he act contradictory to that, you would be very upset. Like if you had a friend and they noticed some bad things about you and they're always pointing them out, and they're always telling other people and talking about them and stuff like that, you wouldn't be happy with them. So it's assumed that they wouldn't be happy with that about you, you know. And how then do you expect him to do for you what you are not determined to do for him? And that, by the way, is an extremely important principle. How do you expect them to do for you what you're not actually doing for them? I've noticed, you know, that in community life, a lot of the problems and I shouldn't say a lot of, but there's a challenge that people have sometimes, which is that we're always looking for what we're looking for from everyone else. And it's much less common that we're asking, am I that for other people? It doesn't seem like it's here, but it might be later on. It's going to come, but there's a statement of gosh, I always forget it. I think it was Junaid about this, who said that so a man came to him. He said, "There's no good brothers these days." He didn't say anything. He repeated it again. He didn't say anything. He repeated it again 3 times. And he said, "No, if you're looking for someone to be a good brother to you, then yeah, they're few and far between. But if you're looking for someone that you can carry his load and you can be of good service to him, then there's many of them I can introduce you to, right?" And so that's a very powerful concept. It's very simple, extremely powerful. Uh, I mean, in like regular Western parlance, they would say something probably, I guess, along the lines of like, be the change you want to see in the world. You know, if you want something to be a certain way, be that way, and then I'm not going to worry about it after that. And this goes back to, again, by the way, this whole issue of we try to control too much. You know, we try to control too much. In the evening class a couple of weeks ago, we covered this principle of, or did we cover it yet? I'm not sure. Basically, the idea that if someone has true servanthood to Allah, then they fully believe that they are incapable of benefiting anyone else in any way, actually, because their complete dependence is on Allah. So I'm not the one that's going to change the person, even if I feel like I have something to offer them, something to help them, something to advise them, something to give them. I'm not the one that's going to bring benefit from that. It's Allah. So at all times, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? If I want to, if I'm, how come they're not doing this, and how come they're not doing this, and how come they're not doing this? It's not my issue, actually. It's not my issue. When I stand in front of Allah, I'm not responsible for how come they didn't do this. When I stand in front of Allah, I'm responsible for how come I didn't do this. And then if I do it, then I trust in Allah, that Allah will change things around me. And He does. We've seen it over and over again. Over and over again. And the Prophet ﷺ said that. Said, كان الله في عون العبد ما دام العبد في عون أخيه. You know, that Allah is in the servant, Allah is in the aid of the servant, as long as the servant is in the aid of his brother or sister. This is how we do it. And you see people live like that. I've told this story many times, that there was, when we were studying, you know, the world of studying Islam is Although people don't realize it, maybe at first glance, it's extremely ego-driven. That's why most of these books of spirituality are basically written to students of knowledge, because like the ego is, you think you're doing something good, but the ego gets into it very strong. So, and then it's also like very extreme. You don't spend time on anything else. You spend all day. We always say we never knew what it meant to study until we went to study Islam. And you see like how people study Islam. It's really serious. People they'll sleep 3, 4, 5 hours. They'll spend the whole day, every day. No breaks, no weekends, no vacations. This is how they spend their life. So I remember when we were moving one time in Cairo and we had some books. So we asked one or two of the brothers to help us move the books and stuff to the new place. And we were going down the stairs and I told one of the brothers, I'm sorry I took you away from their studies and stuff like that, because it's like a couple hours. It's going to take, takes 2 hours to help us move some books. That means like a couple hadith couldn't be memorized, a book couldn't be read, like you lose a lot in 2 hours. So he said, he's like, how can we, he said, how can we expect, or how can we think that Allah will help us in our studies if we don't help our brother when he needs help? The principle was very clear in his head. This is how you function. And mashallah, he was muwaffaq. Allah really gave him a lot in his studies. So if you seek fairness from others but do not observe it yourself, you are included in the verse. الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون. Surah Al-Mutaffifin. Maybe many people have memorized this. What is this verse referring to? Anyone? Yeah, Osman. Yeah, but what is it referring to? What is it about? الذين إذا اكتالوا الناس يستوفون. Huh? Cheaters in what? On the scale, right? So they're doing business. So literally, it's talking about people who are doing business, and when they weigh out in their business transactions, when they weigh for themselves, they're very exacting in how they weigh. And when they weigh for other people, they're a little bit loose with it, right? So it's like basically they're fudging the corners on their business transactions, right? So he uses this verse to talk about personal transactions. You have a relationship, you're friends with someone, so on and so forth. So when I hold that person to account, I'm very exacting. When I hold myself to account, a lot more leniency now. So if you seek fairness from others but do not observe it in yourself, then you're part of this verse. The reason behind neglecting one's duty to conceal other people's faults and being tempted to expose them is rancor and jealousy. Hiqd and hasad. Very interesting. So now he's giving you the problem. The problem is, you see someone else's faults, you don't hide them. Now he's going to tell you, now he's telling us, what is the cause of that problem? Cause of that problem is hatred, basically, and jealousy. And you might look at it and you say, no, that's not true. Just sit with it for a little while. Hasad is very tricky, in particular. Jealousy is very, very tricky. They say that jealousy is like, of course, like the very blatant jealousy is easy. That's not the one. So when you don't think you have it, that's the one that's very tricky. And you don't think you have it, but then something like this happens, and you realize that you have it. Why am I so interested in talking about this person's faults? Why actually? Is it really that important to me? Is it really that, like, it's really immediately an issue of my life? Is it? Sometimes it is. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes there's reason. But like a lot of times people just, especially with certain kinds of people. Why is there such a desire to find the faults of celebrities? Because you wish you were famous, right? Why is, oh, this rich person? Yeah, but he's like this. Okay, why? Because you wish you were rich. You wish people listened to you. You wish you were in charge. You wish this and this. So there's some hidden jealousy in there. We didn't realize it was there. Actually, this is one thing about the issues in the heart. We don't even realize they're there. So one of the benefits that this is giving us is if you see this behavior in yourself, then know that you might have a little bit of that in there. Either you hate this person, some sort of unfounded hatred, or you have some sort of jealousy towards them or whatever else. It's very, mashallah, nice point. As we mentioned, this family were people who they took generally speaking, there were people who took the spiritual path and took their tarbiyah from Sultan al-Awliya himself, from Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani himself. So these are people that were connected to one of the great masters of Islamic spirituality. So he'll give you in one sentence something that's like very, very powerful, subhanAllah. And he's done that already. We've had a couple paragraphs and there's been a lot already today. Now he continues. Know that one of the major reasons behind rancor and jealousy between brothers and sisters is disputation, which only occurs when people attempt to stand out as more virtuous and more intelligent than others and scorn those they criticize. Whoever disputes with his brother or sister is actually calling him ignorant and stupid, or someone who is heedless and oblivious of the reality of something. Think about it, right? Oh, no, you just don't understand. Okay, so what are you actually saying about the person? لا أنت غبي أنت مش فاهم. Like in Arabic, it's very clear. You're dumb and you don't understand. That's what you're telling the person. If you come at them in a particular way, right? If you have disputation is not conversation, right? We're having a conversation with each other. You're sharing something that you know. I'm sharing something that I know. We're not making claims that are not like stretches. We're just really trying to understand the issue and come to some conclusion. That's one thing. But if you start coming at each other like, I know and you don't know, then you're saying something about the other person, right? So it might be subtle, but you are. And then there's a dispute that happens. And when that dispute happens, and this rancor and this jealousy and stuff starts to come up inside of the hearts. All of that is a form of belittlement, and as such creates ill feelings and enmity between people, which is the opposite of brotherhood. Okay? MashaAllah. Very beautiful. Fourth duty. Okay. Fourth duty is long, but it's too early to not start it, so we'll just start it, inshallah. The fourth duty is to use the tongue for speaking out. As brotherhood necessitates not mentioning that which your companion dislikes, it also requires to say that which is beneficial and good. So it's not just to stay quiet, but it's also to say what needs to be said. This is more emphasized in the case of friends, because if a person is content with having a friend who refrains from saying what he dislikes, then he should accompany the dwellers of graves. It's people that are buried, because they're not going to hurt them with the things that they say, right? So now here you get an interesting point that we've mentioned before that's important. Is that how do you reconcile what's being said here? Right? So brotherhood necessitates this, okay? So more in the case of friends, because if a person wants a friend who doesn't say anything that they dislike, then basically they shouldn't have friends. So how do you square this away? This is a principle, we've seen it many times before. So let's see if you can, how do you square this away with, you shouldn't say things that someone dislikes. You should be okay with your friend if they say something that you dislike. And at the same time, you shouldn't be someone who says things to others that they dislike. How do you make sense of it?
Best of others, but only yourself.
Right, right. So the focus here is on yourself, right? When the focus becomes the other, things start to get muddled. Okay. Same thing with this issue. the example that we always give is the issue of thanking people, right? Some people in our community, they're so extreme on this idea of sincerity and that a person should not want to be thanked, right? They should be doing it sincerely for God. They shouldn't care if they're thanked or not. So we're not going to thank them, right? That's not what the Prophet said. The Prophet said, if you're not grateful to the people, you're not grateful to God. And he taught us sincerity. So how do you reconcile it? What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to do it sincerely for God, not seeking thanks. And if someone does something for me, I'm supposed to thank them. And they are not supposed to be expecting that thanks from me. But I'm still supposed to thank them. Okay? I'm not supposed to say things to my friend that they dislike. And if my friend says something to me that I dislike, I should expect that in a relationship. You do both, right? It's a matter of which angle you're looking from. In fiqh, they have a principle about this. It's called al-jiha munfakka. Is the angle that you're looking from is split. So if you look at it from one angle, you can't make sense of it. If you split it and you look at it from two different sides, now you can make sense of it, right? There's a lot of things from that follow this. If you get it, then it will fix a lot of things, inshallah. The reason people choose to have friends and companions is another example, is I think he mentioned it in here. That a parent, right? Usually we only look at it from the angle of the child is obligated to listen to the parent, right? It's the only angle we look at it from. I think it was in here he mentioned it, maybe somewhere else. He says that because of that, the parent should be really careful what they tell their child to do. Right? It's different. You're looking at it now from a different angle. If I know, and again, this comes back to like some of the mashayikh and stuff like sheikhs who give you proper guidance. Sometimes they don't give it. Why? Because they don't want you to not follow it. It's better you came to understand it yourself rather than they had to force it on you. Because if they forced it on you, then you run the risk of them not. Again, this is not in something that you have to do, right? But it's most actually issues of our life and guidance in our life are not in things that we have to do. It's in all of the stuff in between. The have to do and have to not do, that's all clear. It's the stuff in between that we're trying to navigate, right? And a lot of that stuff, it's like, okay, they get it, they get it. The reason people choose to have friends and companions is that benefit is sought from such relationships because controlling the tongue means to protect your companions from the harm of your tongue. Thus, one should employ his tongue to make amorous advances towards his companion, and that's an interesting translation choice, but and check on him and show his concerns if he is concerned, and happiness if he is happy. I don't think that's usually used in English that way, but it might be used in Spanish that way. Do you use it in Spanish that way? Amor, for like someone who's a friend rather than a romantic relationship? Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. Yeah, amor. And amor is used for man and a woman. And the other, yeah. So similar. So to make amorous advances towards his companion, I think it's, yeah, you get the point though. What's the point of the sentences? You have you use the speech to bring the hearts closer. You don't use the speech to bring the hearts apart. Even with our friends, consciously thinking about, I want to use speech in a way that brings the hearts closer in this friendship, not in a way that's going to cause problems between the people. And show his concerns if he is concerned and happiness if he is happy. It is narrated in the authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, if a person loves his brother, then he should inform him of that. Right? So this is Prophet, peace be upon him, specifically told us that when we love our brother or our sister, usually this is in the same gender, I mean, there's ways that you could potentially use it in like a mixed gender setting, but you'd have to be kind of subtle about how you do it and polite and stuff like that. But generally, this would be in same gender. Like, I don't want high school students to be like, you know what, I love this girl for the sake of Allah. I need to tell her the brother's thinking this, it's not what the hadith is talking about. Hadith is talking about you have a relationship with someone they're your friend and you love them, right? And so you tell them that you love them. And the Prophet told it was one of the companions told the Prophet, oh, I really love so and so. And he said, did you tell him that? And he said, no. He said, if you that's the way you feel, you should tell him that. So this is a sunnah. It's a very important sunnah. This includes, maybe I'll stop after this one. This includes calling him with names that he loves the most. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh said, three things make your brother's love for you pure. That you greet him when you see him, that you give him space in a gathering, and that you call him with his names that you love the most. MashaAllah. What a beautiful wisdom. What a beautiful wisdom. So simple. Think about community, actually. So many times when people have issues with community, what do they say? Say, I came, nobody said salam to me. I came, nobody asked how I was doing. I came, nobody made space for me. I came, I wanted to sit down, there was nowhere for me to sit. Nobody noticed, they didn't make any space for me. And then so I just left, you know? So he said three things. One, that you greet them. Two, that you make space for them. And three, that you call them by the names that they love the most, that are most beloved names. So one of the kind of like characteristics of Islam actually is for people to have beautiful nicknames and for us to call each other by those beautiful nicknames. And one of the things they say is that the righteous person, when their soul is taken and their soul is elevated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the angels, when the angels pass by the soul and pass the soul, they call the soul by the most beautiful names that people called them in life, right? So beautiful nicknames is very important. That people will be, the Prophet ﷺ did this, of course. Khalid is Sayfullah, he's the sword of Allah. And Hamza is Asadullah, he's the lion of Allah. And so and so is At-Tayyar, Jafar is At-Tayyar. Why? Because his arms were cut off and he was given wings, in the next life and stuff like this. These are all beautiful names that people have. So this is a very good thing also to think about. Sometimes people do the opposite, right? Give people bad nicknames and stuff like that. Give them a good nickname, best, and then call them by those names. It'll bring love into the heart of the person. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. Any questions or comments? Anyone else? Yes.
And there's already the basketball with paint on it, and you got and you only study from the detail. You know that that's not good, but then you're like, oh, maybe in the other please.
Mhm.
You give them that excuse not saying
I mean, you could ask them, where did you hear this? Or who did you hear this from? Are you part of the conversation or are you not? Mm. Mm. That's hard. That's a hard one. So you would kind of be inserting yourself in the conversation to clarify this thing.
as a general rule, maybe it's hard, but I want to do.
I mean, a lot of times it is. It is sometimes just another school of thought, another method. By the way, it's really hard to know. On the general things that everyone thinks they know the different opinions on, everyone thinks they know the different opinions on, it's fine. But on like the details, it's really hard to know. Sheikh Fuad and I were having a conversation last night about something, and I was like, man, this is impossible. But I didn't know. He's like, yeah, the Malikis, we say this. I'm like, I had no clue, even after all these years, you know. And so it's okay to assume that, but I think I would be kind of shy to insert myself into it. But if I was in it, then I would kind of like try to subtly push them to think about it more. Um, yeah, you know, and part of the etiquette of conversation too is that if something's not asked of a person, they don't answer it. And this is also something that's important to know, again, if you're sitting with people of knowledge and they really pay attention to these etiquettes. So that if you didn't ask them the question, don't assume that they're going to answer it. Even if, like, you put the question to the person next to them and the person gives the wrong answer, you didn't ask them, right? Or you know, also you shouldn't necessarily like volunteer yourself to answer in front of someone who's more knowledgeable and stuff like this, you know. It's also more common than you would think. But all kinds of funny things happen. Human beings are funny, amazing. Human beings are amazing. That's all I have on that. Allah help us. Anyone else have anything? Yes. All of everything.
But you could take it.
Yeah, yeah. That's also a tough one. I mean, there's this kind of like there's a level at which we want to give our children some space, and but we're definitely watching, you know. We're not necessarily assuming, but we're watching. And then if we see certain patterns, then we might not be assuming at that point. We're seeing something. So then it probably warrants investigation. But to be like prying into everything that they're doing and like overwatching everything and stuff like, by the way, watching doesn't necessarily mean even that they know that you're watching, but we are, you know, observing a lot of times. Um, I've seen this again with certain teachers is very interesting. Like you'll be in a gathering and then afterwards they'll be like, oh, that was really interesting. He didn't say anything the whole time. He didn't know that he was, but he's like, I understood a lot from that. This person, how they act, this person, how they act. I saw a lot of things from just observing, you know? So, Allahu Alam. At the same time, we have to give them some space, let them do things. So, there's some balance there. Yeah, it's not easy. There's this really cool, interesting book I was reading called um, Hunt, Gather, Parent. I think it's called Hunt, Gather, Parents. Found it to be quite interesting. And she was giving this example of some indigenous people in, I think it was in somewhere in Mexico. And she was saying that one of the things that she saw from the parent was that if a very small kid said, of course these are small places, they're not like here or something, it's like in a village or something. And the kid would say, I want to go to the store and bring this back. And the mother's like, they're kind of too small to do that, you know? Or they're kind of too small to do that on their own, but they might be able to do it still. So she'll tell them, yeah, go ahead and do it. And then when they go a little bit, she'll tell the older sibling, go and watch from a distance so that this younger one doesn't know that you're watching and only get involved if it's an emergency. Otherwise, you just let them go and do it, right? And then through that, so they get their experiences that they did this thing and they were able to do it and they build their confidence and all of this kind of stuff. They get that experience, and at the same, but they didn't know they were being watched, you know? And I think a lot of parenting is that it's like let them do certain things and okay, I'm not going to intervene on that one. I'm not going to intervene on that one. Okay, here I need to maybe like redirect a little bit. It's very SubhanAllah, may Allah help us. It's hard to figure out. But, you know. Yes, I'm.
So how do you navigate like, so they see households, there was an idea of like unquestioning obedience, parents.
Yeah.
Based on how this over religious doctrine suggests that, that also be the case. Could you help us understand like what a balanced approach is that, accommodates all the rights of parents and children? And if you could like comment on how, for the right is allowed to involve, we principally disagree with a matter of creed, that unduly influences, you know, for either case, like influence religion with following, how we can learn to assimilate if we have principle differences or creedal differences of the parents. How do we help our students that children also create?
Yeah, this is, of course, these issues are very difficult issues, you know. Um, the easy answer is to say have good character. Have good character and have good adab. If you apply that to both sides, fixes all the issues. But the reality is that sometimes there's obviously there's excesses. I think one of the things that maybe one of the mistakes that we make as parents, maybe this is what I can say, is that I think we over-religiousize things. And two things. We over-religiousize, that's not, I don't know if that's a word, but we're gonna go with this manufactured word right now. We over-religiousize things. And number two is that, what was number two? SubhanAllah. That we weaponize religion. So the first one, we over-religionize it, is like, basically, you make everything a chance for a khatira. I noticed this phenomenon in the community. It's like the khatira phenomenon. Always have to have a khatira. It's like a reminder. After the salat, you have a reminder. After the other salat, you have a reminder. After the other salat, you have a reminder. After this, you have a reminder. It's like, how many reminders can a person take in one day? If I'm gonna act upon it, how many can I take? So then in our parenting, it's like every interaction with the kid is no, the Prophet said this, no, this said this, no, this said this, no, this said this, no, this, like that. Where is the naturalness of human life? Like just living your life according to those things. And then of course, what sometimes comes with that is that the parent is not even doing the things that they're asking the kid to do, which is a bigger problem, which would be the case in the sense of someone who's basically an oppressive parent, and then they're just demanding obedience, right? Well, the first priority here would be that you don't be an oppressor. And then we can worry about the obedience of the child afterwards. Then it's not in the... anyways, that's number one. Number two is to weaponize religion all the time. Right? You have to listen to me because you have to obey your parents. If you don't obey your parents, you're going to go to hell. Okay, well, like, why would I threaten my child with hell? It's not exactly like the best look to threaten my child with hell. I don't want my child to go to hell. Why would I even, I would be lying. But like using this, if you do this, then this is going to happen. You do this, like it's weaponizing it. It's very, very destructive, extremely destructive. But again, that's all actually bad character. It's all bad character. That's not good character. Good character is like you have love, you have mercy, you have understanding, you have some explanation, you have consistency in yourself, you have stability in yourself, you have all of these things, and you're able to bring that to the relationship with the child, right? And then the child is, for children, is harder to answer because actually, for the most part, until you're an adult, you're subject to your parents. And most of that time, even, you're not really such an active player in that relationship. Like, when do you really become an active player in the relationship with your parents is probably when you get to like your teens. And you start to have too many opinions, and like at the same time you actually have more of something to like give in the relationship in a sense, right? Then that lasts for a few years and then you leave. So it's not really a whole lot of, most of the years the child is just taking whatever the parent is giving them, right? And that's a responsibility on the parents. But and then if that's the nature of the relationship, and you know, if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's different, right? So then how the child is going to have to figure out, how am I going to, despite these circumstances, be the best that I can be, so that I can get to the point where I can interact with this person in a way that is beneficial, and that's that. Of course, there's many variations on this, and that can be very tough, very, very tough, depending, and of course, there's variations on this that are not even super extreme. They're just hard. They're still hard, but they're not extreme. And then there's extreme cases that are like, how do you even deal with that? You probably can't. Um, but this is something I've been thinking about lately, is that there's a lot of emphasis in our current cultural discourse around, like, boundaries, and when you have this issue and you set this thing and then you break off, you have to break away from those people because they're toxic and all this kind of stuff. And all of that is, it can be very true, but, and it might even be necessary at a certain point. But like, when you plant a tree and the tree starts to grow a little bit, and you put like that piece of wood on the tree so that it stays and it can grow, like, it's not meant to stay there forever. It's not meant to be like, this tree is forever going to have this piece of wood next to it, and that's how it's going to stay. Eventually, like, the tree, maybe someone has such a horrible situation that they actually cannot interact with their parents. Okay, I want to, maybe I need to take that space, but eventually I want to be able to interact at some level. In most cases. Again, there's actually cases where you just wouldn't interact because, your parent, whatever, would be that. But Allah understand. These are complicated issues. Allah help us and give us tawfiq. In the end, everything is good character. Good character is a lot harder, as we've talked about in these last sessions, because this whole section is on good character, right? And good character is a lot harder than it sounds. But like, they asked one of the scholars of like a big family of tasawwuf and spirituality and stuff like that, how come you didn't write books on family? You guys wrote on everything. How come you guys didn't write books on family? He said, because we wrote books on spirituality. So if people just followed what's in them, they wouldn't have family issues. And so you teach them everything they need from good character and so on, and then their issues would be resolved. They didn't have to write something on family. It was already there. So, but good character solves a lot of things, but good character is very difficult. It takes a lot of patience. A lot of patience. You have to be very strong. That's what's nice about it too. It makes people strong. Never misunderstand, like, someone who's very kind, very gentle, very well-mannered, stuff like that. Don't ever think that they're weak. It takes a lot of strength to do that. And to take the proper position in different situations, very difficult. Anyone else have anything? Yes.
I'm a little confused with when you speak about giving kids space, but then giving your friends spaces at a gathering, it seems like different in some. Like when the guy said, I went to a place and not to make space for me, maybe they.
Yes. Yes, so their space, so in the sense of people who come to the gathering, making space for them would be like literally giving them somewhere to sit. Not like, say everyone's sitting here and the person comes, there's nowhere to sit, and they just end up on the side. So this would be like, that's not giving them space in that sense. But when we were talking about the kids, it was more like a metaphorical space, kind of feel. It's not a physical space. It's more like you let them grow a little bit. It's kind of like, when people talk about helicopter parenting, and how helicopter parenting causes a lot of problems, actually. When parents are watching every single moment that the kid is doing, can create, in that sense, they need some space. They need to be left alone. Maybe they don't want to talk right now. Okay, leave them alone. Maybe you saw that they did something wrong, or maybe you're talking to them and you know that they said something that's not truthful. And you can see it in them. You don't push them on it right then. You give them a little bit of space. This is the kind of space here. Yeah. And then later on they come and they're like, yeah, that wasn't really truthful. Yeah, yes, relationships are politics. Relationships are politics. It's important we understand that. And in politics, always remember that Muawiyah said, they call it Sharat Muawiyah, the hair of Muawiyah. They asked Muawiyah, how do you rule over these people? They're very difficult to rule over. Like it's famous that these people, it's very difficult to rule them. They're very rebellious. They don't, all of these things. What do you do? He said, I imagine that there's a hair between me and them. They're holding one side, I'm holding one side. When they pull, I give a little bit. And when they give a little bit, I pull. So we have this little dance going on, but we don't break the hair that's between me and them. It's very wise. Yes.
And etymologies. So when you mentioned cariño in Spanish, I wonder if there's a connection between that and cariño in Arabic.
Could be. Cariño, yeah. Cariño. Cariño, could be. SubhanAllah. A lot of links between Spanish and Arabic. Of course, because the Arabs ruled Spain for 800 years, which is a really long time. If you think, most of us, our world is about 200 years. The way we think about the world, Americans, it's usually like 200 years. 800 years is a really long time. So, yeah, could be. Actually, it would make sense too. Because you don't use qareen for a romantic relationship. Really, it's more of like yeah, interesting. Yes.
So I think let's just say there is strife with your parents, so to speak, or your child. Would the attempts to navigate that to have like the most peaceful outcome also like contribute to a larger, like I'm thinking generational, because obviously like the way you parent comes from how your parents were parented and
Mhm.
so would it contribute to something larger if you actually do that? Navigate those streets of tension and obviously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you're like you think about it in the sense that you're playing a long game and you're breaking this. Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that's SubhanAllah. What was that narration? We just read it last week. Read it in the evening last week and I forgot it already. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Okay, let me comment on that and then I'll bring it in and I'll explain why I'm thinking about it. So the point was that when we have these kind of conflicts between parents and children and so on, and then as a parent, maybe I'm trying to, I've been affected by the way that I was parented. Our default is whatever our parents did. Unless we make some sort of very serious effort, our default is whatever our parents did. And many of our patterns of thought, many of our patterns of behavior. And so sometimes we might look at it and say, okay, I need to change that. That wasn't good. I love them, but it wasn't good. And I don't want to do that with my children. And that can be very taxing, right? But one of the things that helps sometimes when dealing with a difficult situation is to understand it in the context of something bigger. So if I'm looking at it as, yeah, this is something that came from my parents, and if I give it to my children, then they're going to give it to their children, but I have a chance here to change the pattern. In a sense, I'm looking at it from something bigger, and that can be beneficial to help with the situation. The narration that I was trying to think about, but I can't get more than the vagueness of it, was that one of the companions was the Prophet ﷺ, and he was breathing very heavily. He told him what's going on, and he said something was. He said, "Daqat alayya dunya," like just life has become so hard on me. It's really interesting. He's like taking breaths. Life got hard on him. He's taking breaths, and the Prophet ﷺ told him basically, like, okay, that's what it was. So, but the lands of Sham, they're going to be opened, And you're going to be from the people who are, you and your family will be from the people who are imams in the lands of Sham. So he gave him like, he's dealing with some issue right in front of him that's overwhelming him, and he caused him to look at a bigger scale. So sometimes when we get overwhelmed with something that we're in the middle of, when we put it in the context of something bigger, it gives us a little bit extra motivation. So that can be helpful. Yeah. I find that to be helpful. Like I feel like one of the most liberating things for me as a Muslim was to stop thinking about my Islam in the context of 100 years and start thinking of my Islam in the context of 1400 years. It made a huge difference. You know, many Muslims live the whole psychology of their Islam is only in the last 100 years. And that's very taxing, you know. When you look at it in a broader context, like, no, I just want to be connected somehow to 1400 years and how it spread in different places and did different things. And now I'm here in this country, you know, alhamdulillah, we do whatever we do. We're a small link in a chain that's much bigger than ourselves. There's a relief in that. If I think that I'm the whole chain, it's a lot of pressure. But no, there's a lot of things, you know. Allah is God. All right, anything else? سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم استرنا بسترك الجميل اللهم استرنا بسترك الجميل اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية المعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم ارزقنا حسن الخاتمة اللهم ارزقنا حسن الخاتمة اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك يا عالم السر منا لا تهدك الستر عنا وعافنا واعف عنا وكن لنا حيث كنا ايقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من غفلة عنك وجعل آخر كلامنا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله كما يليق بكماله سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله جزاكم الله خيرا